Welcome everyone to today's webinar, 5 Tips for Highly Converting Websites. My name is Matt Baer. I'm the founder of Q4Launch, and I'm excited to bring you this topic today. This is brand new content that we've created based off of some experimentation that we've been doing with our customers, some trends we've been seeing in the industry, and there's a lot of exciting things I'm looking forward to going over with you today. If this is your first time with us, welcome. We are glad you are along for the ride. A little bit about myself and Q4Launch, and then we'll dive in. Q4Launch is a company that specializes in destination marketing. We work with some of the top destinations and lodging organizations around the world, from Singapore to Maui and just about everywhere in between, and bring a lot of our customer data to the marketplace to help benefit everyone through webinars like this, our blog, which you can follow, as well as our Facebook page and many other mediums that we share our content on. So again, we just share this content to bring value to the marketplace and give back some of the things that we're learning as part of our core value at Q4Launch, which is to share knowledge. So excited to bring that to you today. For those of you who have been with us before, glad you are back as well. We are having a crazy busy fall season, lots of change in the marketplace, lots of exciting things coming from us here at Q4Launch in 2017, one of which I'm going to preview for you a little bit today to talk about some new opportunities we're making available for people. We're also going to be, if you've been with us on the last couple webinars, we've been using polls more, and they're really helpful for us in keeping up with what you all are doing. So we are going to have a couple polls today, questions that we will launch amidst our content. So if you can help us out by responding to those polls promptly, that will keep everything moving along from a schedule perspective and give us some information that can help us as we're planning things over the next year for you, bringing webinar content and so forth. So with that, we will dive in. If this is your first time with us today, you will see a little bit of information here on this first screen that you are familiar with. Well, let me unpause the screen. There we go. All right, and that's the mind of the vacationer. So one of the things we do a lot at Q4Launch is studying consumer behavior, specifically to people who are booking travel. And if you've been with us, you've seen this slide before, but we want to touch on it because it's so important to how we're planning our websites and thinking about conversion. And that's this, and we're going to touch real briefly, but the 5 stages of travel. Google did a research study back in 2011 that this data came from. And it's the concept that the stages of travel are these 5, and it's dreaming, planning, booking, experiencing, and remembering. The majority of people wrap their entire marketing strategy around the booking stage. And that makes sense, right? I mean, that's where the actual money changes hands. That's what you're measuring with your e-commerce conversion rate or any other software you're using to track that. But if you do that, not only you're ignoring the dreaming and planning stage of the vacation booking process or the whole vacation process. So if we build marketing, or in this case we design our websites around the dreaming and planning stage, we are building a funnel that will help people get to the booking stage, and when they get there, have an easy experience to be more likely to book with you than one of your competitors. And as we look at increasing conversion on your website, that's what we're talking about here, right? I mean, it's increasing the percentage of people who take an action on your website. Most of us think of conversion and we think of the actual booking, and that's part of it. We're going to talk about that today. But we're going to also talk about some other things to help in that conversion process. So as you're building a new website or you're thinking about the one you have and some changes you may want to be making, think through these 5 stages of travel. Get inside the mind of the vacationer. Think about the challenges that they're having as they move through these stages. And when you think about that, and you really think about your customer, you'll be surprised some of the aha moments that you'll have. We talk also a lot about the curse of knowledge. And as marketers, as professionals in this industry, we have the curse of knowledge. We are in our properties every single day, and we don't know what it's like to not know what we know, which I know that's a mouthful, but we don't know what it's like to not know what we know. And that's the curse of knowledge. But your customers, or your prospective customers, I should say, don't know what you know. They don't know the ins and outs of those properties. They don't know about the special things in your area, what makes it unique. They don't know about those things. And we have to design our marketing and our websites around those things to make it important. We also want to talk about your website and why it's so important. I don't have a slide for this, but information we want to add to our conversation today. And that's the concept of the fact that your website is one of the most integral pieces of your entire marketing strategy. At Q4 Launch, we believe your website is a part of your marketing strategy. It's not a project. It's not something you launch that then lives that way forever. It should be continually evolving as a resource, as a sales tool, as your best salesperson that's online 24/7, and it's the hub of everything that you're doing from a marketing perspective. So all of your other marketing channels, third-party distribution sites like Booking.com, BedandBreakfast.com, VRBO, HomeAway, Airbnb, all those distribution sites should be driving business back to your website at some level. They're a little bit more tricky, and they're trying not to do that, but you've got to look for strategies to do that as well. Your email marketing, your social media, your blog strategy, all these things should be driving traffic back to your website. And as we're investing in driving traffic back there, as I know so many of you are, or you're looking at in 2017 as an opportunity for growing your business, you've got to be thinking about, is my website performing well? Is it doing the best it can do? And we have evolved a lot of our marketing strategies around thinking about that conversion path on our customers' websites. And some of the things from that we're going to share with you today. So just wanted to set that tone at the beginning. They're really thinking about the vacationer and what their challenges are, what stage of travel they're in, and then thinking about your website as the hub of your marketing system and building it around that and building it with a level of importance that speaks to the fact that it is the hub of your marketing success. And as we do that, we have to kind of break away from some things and really understand that it's a scientific process that starts with understanding consumer behavior. I say it starts with understanding consumer behavior because until we understand that, we understand what our customer is going through, the challenges they're facing, the opportunities they have, the excitement that they're feeling, or possibly the pain that they're feeling based on how good your website's doing or how bad your competitors may be doing. Until we understand those things, you can't really start designing for these things. You can't start making decisions around these things until you tie into that. And I think that's a big gap for a lot of people. They don't stop and think about those things. Many web designers are not thinking about the customer journey when they're designing a website. They're trying to launch a pretty brochure. And that's what they think your website is. They think it's a brochure online that people flip through to showcase your property. And that's really not what it is. That's what it was 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, but that's not what it is in today's modern marketing world. Your website is a shopping cart. It is a sales engine. And just like your grocery store is designed very, very on purpose for what you know and the way consumers flow through them, and they spend hundreds of millions of dollars every year in grocery store design and in bigger picture than that, retail store design, we have to be thinking about those things. And you need to be really looking at it from a marketing perspective and thinking marketing when you're designing your website, not thinking web design, not thinking X's and O's, code this, do that, but really thinking about the scientific process people flow through when they're moving through that. And that looks a little bit like this. Who our customer is. These are the questions we should be asking. Who our customer is. Why do they buy from you? What do they need to make their buyer's journey easier, right? That journey, they're on a journey to book an accommodation. That's probably why they're on your website. What fears do they have that are preventing them from making a purchase decision? You're going to hear me talk a lot today about fear, and that's because fear is the #1 motivator. And that's the reason, that's the #1 reason people do not make a booking decision is because they are afraid of the result. If you think about this whole review phenomenon that has really blown up over the last 5 years, and there's a lot of interesting research on it, and really interesting to see the way people are marketing, the third-party sites are marketing around the review piece of it. But if you think about that and you ask yourself, why did that start? It started because of that. It started because of fear. And people view reviews as a crowdsourced way of overcoming fear. I'm afraid to commit to spending thousands of dollars at your property because I don't know what I'm going to get. Sure, your website's beautiful. Sure, your property photos are beautiful. All that's great, but I'm afraid of what that experience is going to be like. And reviews have stepped in to fill that gap for people and make that easier for them to really understand that. I had a question in the chat about how to unmute. We don't let attendees unmute because we need you to be quiet so we can keep the content moving. If you have a question, you can use the chat panel to do that. But please don't try to unmute yourself because we want to keep any background noise eliminated for our attendees today. But thank you for that question. All right, so let's dive in. Buckle up. We got to move pretty quick to get our 5 tips in here in the next 30 to 45 minutes or so. #1 tip for you is to remove clutter. Clutter makes things difficult to find what you need. I think clutter is one of the biggest hindrances a lot of websites have today in driving conversion. You need to remove clutter and focus on that buyer journey you want to guide somebody down, which we're going to talk a little bit later on as well. But you really need to remove that. And as you start the process of removing clutter with your website designer, you'll notice, you should at least, that conversion starts to increase. So you got to look at that and think about, how can I remove clutter? How can I simplify this process to make it easier for people? And I had an example. I was going to show you this today, but when I took it from the web and put it into a screenshot, the example kind of broke down. So I'm actually going to skip past that here in a minute when we get to that slide. But you can look around the web and you can find examples of clutter on websites. And you can think about, what does that do to me in my conversion path? How does that make me feel? If you're looking at that image that we have associated with it, if that was your desk, how would you feel when you got into work that morning? If you had papers stacked all over the place, how does clutter make you feel? And there's a lot of studies out there around this. There's studies about clutter on desks. There's studies about clutter in interior design and the way we design our own homes, but also the way we design the properties that we're working with, or not we in this case, but you, the proverbial we here, and thinking about the way that clutter impacts your guest experience. It starts on your website, and it starts with them making a decision whether to book or not, and then it extends itself into your actual interior design when they are on property and the way they experience that. But if you have a lot of clutter on property and it's showing up in your photos, people may not tell you they're not booking because of clutter, right? Because people that don't book, you really don't get any information from them. But a lot of times we'll see properties that have a ton of clutter in their interior design, and when you showcase that on your website, it's a part of the problem. And that's not a part of what I'm talking about here. It's not all of what I'm talking about. I'm also talking about clutter in your actual website design. But clutter in the photos of your website design is a bad thing as well. It creates that negative subconscious association. It feels busy, it feels crowded, it feels like an experience I don't want to have as a consumer. And the consumer may not come out and tell you that, but subconsciously that's the experience that they're having when they're navigating your website, getting frustrated because they can't find what they want, or they're looking at your photos and they're noticing a lot of clutter in those, and it's causing that same issue. So remove clutter is a great way to be able to drive greater conversion, and focusing on it in your design of your site first and foremost. It's one of the biggest mistakes we see people making as they're working with us to design new websites. And one of the things that our customer experience managers are trained in to say, let's not do that, let's not do that, let's not do that. And we have to say that a lot, because a lot of times people want to put things, they want to put clutter into their site because they think more is better, when in reality, less is more. And we need to think like that. And Apple is one of the companies that leads the field in doing this and doing it well, and that less is more concept of design. And if you look at their website or you look at the products they're creating, you'll see that simplicity and that less is more mindset carried throughout. So you have to get the right information to them, but not clutter it and make it difficult for them to find what they're looking for. And that will help them move their way down that conversion path. So let's skip along here and talk about tip number 2, and that is to design mobile first. 55% of travel industry traffic comes from mobile phones or tablets. And that's an average that we found across our customer base, so your number is probably slightly different, but I would bet you it's in that 50 to 60 range. And what's astounding to us is that the majority of traffic comes from mobile devices, yet the majority of website design budgets is spent on desktop design. So we're spending the majority of our budget designing for the minority of our customers. And yes, you can make the argument that, well, that's true, but the majority of booking happens on a desktop device. And that's true, although we see that trend shifting, and I think it will continue to shift. But the majority of shopping is happening on a mobile device. And oftentimes what happens is someone will come to your website, they'll shop the first time, and then they'll come back to make their booking. It's not all that often that somebody makes a booking on their first trip to your website. There's usually multiple trips to your site that are involved in actually making their booking because of buy-in from other people they may be traveling with, or just wanting to take that time to think about it, or they're waiting to hear back from you on a question, or whatever it is. There's tons of reasons people don't book on their first trip to your site, but the majority of that happens the second or third time. So their first visit, the point I'm trying to make, their first visit may be on their mobile device, but they may come back for a convenient factor on their desktop to actually make that booking. So you have to have a great mobile experience and design for that. The other reason this is important is because as you're thinking about design and you're working with a web designer, it is really difficult to take a website that was designed on a 27-inch iMac, which is about the size monitor that most designers actually work on. Most of us browse on about a 14 to 17-inch screen, but most designers are working on a 27-inch screen. It's hard to go from a website that was designed for a full-screen experience and squeeze that down into a mobile experience. Whereas it's much easier to take a website you designed for mobile and expand that to fit onto a bigger screen and look at the way different parts of that site move and change based on the screen size, which goes back to responsive design. But if you design for the mobile phone first and you navigate through that, and then you expand your website to a bigger screen, a larger screen, a desktop screen, it gets easier. So as you're working with a designer, that's an important question to ask. Is what's your mobile process like? Don't ask them the question, do you design mobile first? Because that's a leading question, and of course they'll tell you yes, because I think that's what you want to hear. But ask them a question about their mobile design process, and let them tell you about that and see the way they're talking about it, because that's really what they should be doing to give your customer the best experience that they can. And we've just spent about $100,000 as an organization redesigning the framework that our websites work on. And one of the big things we did, a big part of that investment for us, was really honing in on the mobile design aspect of what we're doing, knowing that it's such a growing trend, and really making sure that that experience for our customers was as great as it could be. And we're excited to have made that investment. We're excited to be bringing those things to the marketplace and improving that customer experience and seeing the fruits of that, seeing mobile booking increase, see mobile bounce rates decrease, mobile time on site increasing. Those indicators that say, hey, the design is performing well, your customers like this. So that's really exciting for us and something I would encourage you to be looking at as well. And then as you're trying to figure out what that should look like for you, if you're in the process or thinking about a website redesign, make sure that you're shopping around. Look at some of the industry leaders. You can bet that Expedia, Booking.com, Amazon, Apple, some of these major e-commerce people are spending millions of dollars studying and designing for this. And you don't have a budget to spend millions of dollars on your next website redesign. Probably, I'm guessing you don't. But you can learn from them. You can learn about what they're doing and figure out, how can I learn from what they've spent millions of dollars figuring out and apply those things to your own business. So a really important part as we're thinking about conversion in 2017, making sure that you have a great mobile experience and that you've designed for mobile first. And take that to that next step as well and go through the whole booking process on your mobile phone. It will just make it better. It will make it easier for everything that you're doing, going through and testing that actual booking process on your mobile phone. Because some booking engines, while you might have a beautiful mobile site, if your booking engine isn't designed mobile first, that whole experience could break down. And you'll see that if you're tracking it in analytics, you'll see that people leave at that step at a higher rate than they leave on desktop. A certain number of people will always leave in that step, but if it's a higher rate than it is on the desktop version, which you can track all that in Google Analytics, then you may have a problem with the design of your mobile booking engine. So an important thing to look at and make sure you're tuned into. The next is to design a conversion path or funnel, and there's a lot of information we're going to share as a part of this step. So if you are taking notes, definitely grab that pad of paper, take some notes for yourself. Of course, we're recording today's webinar as well, so you'll be able to watch that, recap it when we get that recording sent out. But an important thing to think about is this whole AIDA, which we're going to dive into here. And that's this concept of designing a conversion path or funnel. Really looking at your target segment and then designing in a way that moves them down. The first step of this is awareness. We have to get awareness. We have to be found by our potential customers to be able to get to our website in the first place, right? So there's a lot of marketing that you do, and this AIDA is something we use throughout our marketing planning and strategizing processes. But how many visitors do you have to your website to keep your properties as full as you want them to be? How are people finding you? And that's a really important question, because the way you're generating awareness, i.e. the way people are finding you, is key to think about when you're designing your site and designing it for conversion. Our customers see that about 30% of their traffic enters their website through their blog. Enters the website through the blog, right? I mean, most people design because they think their homepage is where everyone enters their website. But in reality, if you're doing marketing well, a large percentage of traffic will enter your website via your blog if you're doing that and doing it well. And if they're doing that, if they're entering through your blog, you have to think about the fact that that's their first experience. And you have to design your blog specifically for a conversion path. Think about that person, what they were doing that got them to navigate into your blog as their first step, as their landing page, if you will. And then how are you designing your blog? And this is one of the things when I talked about designing with a marketing mindset as opposed to designing as you're a web designer. You think about things like this when you're a marketer, because you think about the fact that the analytics tell us 30% of people are entering our website through our blog, so we have to make sure that's a great experience for them. So as you're thinking about that as well, I'd be looking at the places people enter your website and make sure you're designing those for a specific conversion path, because someone entering your website via the blog likely has a different conversion path than someone who entered on your homepage, and you've got to think about those things differently. Do you have an integrated marketing plan? Do you have a plan to raise awareness across the customer base? And that's what it's all about. Like, you've got to develop a plan. If you want more traffic, if you want more conversion, you have to build a plan to create more awareness. Once we have that awareness, right, once we get them to the website, we move on to the place of generating interest or engagement. So does your website engage them? Are you telling a story through your photos, using great photography? Photography is one of the most important parts of website design and one of the most important parts of conversion. We can send out the same website 10 different times with 10 different sets of photography, and we would get different quote-unquote satisfaction ratings on the quality of that website based solely on the photography. So it's really important. We've taught on photography in the past, and we work with many great photography partners, and I've said on those webinars, I don't care how much money you spent on your photography, it wasn't enough. And the point isn't go spend more money than you have to, but the point is you can't spend too much, because photography is so critical to the overall success of your business. Yet we see so many people not really thinking about what this does as a part of their overall conversion journey and what it does as a part of generating that interest, creating that emotional intrigue. Using lifestyle photography to really bring people in and show them the type of lifestyle they can expect to have. You see a lot of use of lifestyle photography with higher-end brands and higher-end properties, but there's ways you can do that and make that affordable for you and your own company if you have photographers, especially in your local area, but not being afraid to reach outside of that to get somebody great to come in. We've been a part of so many photo shoots, and one of my favorite photo shoots, it was before the drone days, where there was actually a helicopter, and we flew the helicopter in to get shots that now would be taken with a drone. And the point of telling that story is to say that customer thought it was important enough to get that shot, they brought in a helicopter pilot to fly their photographer and videographer around, and that was probably a $100,000 project. But that's how much they thought of it. And the good news is for you, much of that can be accomplished for 1% of the price with a drone today that used to be out of reach for many of us in the budgets we're looking at from a marketing perspective. And then making sure as you're working on that you're using conversion opportunities to convert them, right? That's kind of a silly sentence, but you're using conversion opportunities that speak to the interest they have, that speak to where they are in their customer journey, where they are in this funnel that they're navigating their way through that ultimately ends with them making a booking. And then are you using internal linking to move them effortlessly through your website? Making that as simple as possible. We've seen dramatic increases in conversion when we've launched internal linking strategies amongst our customers. So if you really look at that and you study the way people are navigating through your site and you roll out better, more strategic internal linking, it can help you with SEO, but it can also help you with conversion rate. So a really important thing to be thinking about as you're working on that interest, which ultimately leads to conversion. And then next is desire, and this speaks to that lifestyle photography as well. But when was the last time you really desired a product? I want you to think about that. I want you to think about what that product was. For many of us, you're probably thinking about an Apple product right now. I know many of the people that I run into as I'm traveling and I'm speaking, we talk about Apple because it's very travel friendly as well. I'm more of a Samsung guy personally, but we won't get into the debate of Apple versus Samsung and all that goes into that. But think about that. Apple has done a phenomenal job of creating desire for their products. And as many of us are in the travel space, we need to be thinking about that as well. If you have a product that sets itself up for a romantic getaway, what does marketing for desire look like in that? People say that sex is one of the top selling tools there is. And I'm not saying sexify your website, but how can you use your website to create desire? It's not all about using skin to sell. It's actually not about that at all. You can communicate those things through your photography and through your storytelling that will help do that, especially in the fall season that we're in right now. A fire in a fireplace can visually communicate and create desire, but that is allowed to go into the consumer's mind, and they do with that what they want it to be. If that's for them, if that's them and their significant other sitting by that fire that leads to desire, good for them. If that's their family sitting around that fire and having time as a family to connect in a way that they can't when they're back home and they're all surrounded by distractions of home, using subtle imagery like that and storytelling like that allows the consumer to go where they want to go, where they naturally go in their mind without you having to use skin and sex to sell your product, which we don't recommend as an overall strategy. But understanding what drives that desire and really diving into that and thinking about that. And the same is true for families as it is for couples. What makes them want to make a booking with you? What is it that they're coming for? They're coming for those memories. They're coming for that time of watching their kids build a sandcastle, or watching their child ski down those slopes for the first time and learn what they're passionate about, or go for a hike and experience nature in a way that they can't in the city that they live in. So thinking about those things, thinking about the desire that your consumers have and what those experiences that you're selling are, will help you as you're building your strategy and converting people. Because every step they take on your website, every page they visit, every exposure they have to you, your properties, and your brand makes an impression. It's either positive or negative. There's very few neutral impressions in the marketplace. So you've got to be looking at those steps as you guide people down that and say, what type of impression am I making? Am I creating desire? Once I get them past interest, am I creating desire for them to buy my product? And the last, and of course the most important, is action. It all funnels down to booking. And in most cases, booking is the conversion path that we want people to achieve. But we also have to understand that it's dreaming, planning, booking, experiencing, remembering that we talked about earlier. And that you need to have conversion paths built on your site that don't end in booking. Because if you think about what I just mentioned, consumers rarely book with one visit to a website. Typically, that's a multiple visit experience. So knowing that, many of their visits, and in most cases 99% of visits to your website, because the average conversion ratio is between 0.5% and 1%, many visits to your website, 99 to 99.5% of visits to your website end in something other than a booking, which is huge. So you've got to be thinking about, other than booking, what do I need to end my conversion path in? What other opportunities are there to get someone to quote-unquote convert, take a defined step other than booking, and building your website and building your marketing strategy around those things, and analyzing that as a part of your sales process, because a lot of times that's where lead generation comes in. And I don't understand why, but as a lodging industry, we don't think about lead generation, and it's one of the things we speak a lot about at conferences and that we preach heavy to our customers, is to think about lead generation. One of the things we help many of them with. But that helps you reduce your dependency on third-party distribution. It helps you increase your conversion rate, and it helps you fill that sales funnel or that booking funnel with more and more customers. It helps you move them down that process. And even if they're not ready to make a booking today, you get the opportunity to get them to convert, so you can earn the right to continue to market to them, so when they are ready to make a booking, they're more likely to book with you than one of your competitors. And then making sure in that remembering stage of those 5 stages of travel, how are you marketing to past guests to make them repeat guests? How do you market to your past guests to get them to come back to your website and take action again, to get them to book with you again? It's a really important part of your overall marketing strategy and process that you need to make sure that you're addressing. All right, number 4, improve your checkout process. This is such an important part, and this is some data that we have that is a really important part to look at. This is actually e-commerce data. It's very difficult to get data specific to our segment of the lodging industry because it's a relatively small segment. So sometimes we have to look at bigger picture data. But this is the data that we're looking at from e-commerce. And that tells us that of non-bounce visits, right, non-bounce visits are people that do not bounce from your website. So typically about 30% of people bounce on the first page they come to. So excluding those, what percentage of people start the booking process, or because this is e-commerce statistics, we use the word checkout process, but looking at those two things together. And the data tells us that 5% of people who visit a website will initiate the checkout process, but typically only 0.5% to 1% will complete the checkout process. So somewhere through that journey of checkout or through that journey of booking, we're losing 90% of people that start the process. Between 80 and 90% of people that start the checkout process never complete it. And there is a whole host of science around this, and we can't dive into all of it today, but really understanding why people are lost here. And if you have a lot of traffic to your website and you have a lot of activity and conversions happening, you need to be studying this. So of the 5% or 4.9 that start the checkout process, 2.4 actually initiate it. So they go into their cart and they start filling in the information. So they start filling out that form, 2.5% or 50% of the people that started it. And then on average, 1% of people complete checkout. So 1% of people who come to your website will actually make a booking with you. Now when you think about it, that means 99% of people got lost. And we talked a little bit about how to build strategies for those 99% and getting them to convert. But you've got to be looking at that as well. And in our industry, to give you some data from our customers, we see this a little bit closer to the 0.5 to 1.5%. We have customers who are converting at 1.5% specifically on bookings, and we have customers converting about 0.5%. A lot of it is based around the amount of traffic you have and where it's coming from, and studying conversion by channel is important as well. Studying conversion by traffic channel, i.e. email marketing, social media, organic search, traffic to your blog. Studying your conversion by those will help give you additional insight. And not every marketing channel is created equal either. So we expect to see different conversion rates by marketing channel. We expect email marketing traffic to convert at a different rate than social media traffic, than organic traffic, than PPC traffic or AdWords traffic. So you've got to have expectations for those things. And then you've got to study that. Where are you losing people in the process? Is a travel insurance sale or something else, maybe it's a package sale or an upgrade, getting in the way of a $2,000 booking? I would hate for a $50 travel insurance sale to get in the way of a $2,000 booking. But I've seen it time and time again that people will have something, whether it's travel insurance or a package, they'll have something that stands in the way of them getting the booking. And the more committed someone is to making a booking, the more other choices they lack. So if you have something that there's tons of other choices out there, tons of competitors, you have less opportunity to put things in their path. If you have something they can only buy from you, you're the only person in the world who sells it, you can get away with a lot more. You can put a lot more barriers in the checkout process and still get away with it. GoDaddy, for example, puts a lot of barriers in their checkout process. But they know if you're going to buy a domain name, there's not a ton of places you can go, and they have extremely high conversion rates as a part of that process. So they can get away with these things. We, as an industry, can't get away with it quite as much. So you've got to think about it a little bit more aggressively and not put barriers like in the way of your consumer. Now, don't hear me say don't sell travel insurance, because that's not what I'm saying. Or don't sell packages, or don't upgrade people. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you've got to study it and know, is this working for you? We had one customer we worked with, and overnight their conversion rate dropped by over half. We weren't their website developer. We were doing their marketing. We were working with another company who was their website developer, and we kind of freaked out, right? We said, whoa, what just happened? The e-commerce conversion rate dropped by half overnight. Something dramatic happened. So we started scrambling, looking. Is traffic down? Did Google do something? And what's going on? We went through the process. We studied and studied and studied it to figure it out. And finally, we were able to figure out, and part of where the story comes from, is that travel insurance, the way they were selling travel insurance, changed on their website. And when they changed that, the way that it was designed was a terrible, confusing experience for the customer. So the customer got there, they were initiating checkout, they were initiating the booking, they were filling that in, they got frustrated, and they ultimately bounced out of that process. And a lot of those people probably went somewhere else. But that web designer had made that process very confusing and painful for people. And in doing that, it was really, really hard for them to move through that process. Finally, we were able to find that. It took a lot of man hours to track that down and figure that out, but finally we were able to find that, work with their web developer to get that process corrected, and immediately e-commerce conversion rate came back up. But it was a journey and a process of getting there. And then the last piece here is making sure that it's not slow and cumbersome, especially on mobile devices. It can be really slow and cumbersome to go through a booking process on a mobile device, but make sure that your site is performing fast. Make sure that the booking engine piece of that is performing fast, and to go through that whole experience. One of the things we do as an organization, and we do this to drive a lot of our processes, our customers' processes, but also our internal process, is that we will test things, and we'll have our employees activate the stop clock on their phone, and we'll say, okay, do this. Whatever the process is, do the process, navigate it through, tell me how long it takes. And there's so many things that can factor into that speed, the quality of the computer you're using, your internet connection, the hosting if it's a web application, so much factors into that. But we as a company believe in the value of get a little bit better every day. And as a part of that, we're always looking for ways to reduce the time people spend in processes, whether they're our employees and trying to improve the process to make them more efficient, or it's improving the process for our customer's customer to increase booking. You've got to make sure that your processes are not slow and cumbersome. So here's a booking page. It's an example of one. This is part of our new vacation rental framework that we've built, and it's just a really simple one-page checkout. Very easy for the guest, not asking for redundant information, summarizing the information very clearly and simply, using colors to draw attention to buttons that we want them to use, those types of things, and just making it very, very simple for the customer to have a clean checkout process. We found, and this comes from us studying Amazon, is that one-page checkout processes work best. There used to be a philosophy that multi-steps worked better because the consumer would only give you maybe 4 or 5 fields at one time. Like, I'll give you 4 fields, then I'll give you 4 more, then I'll give you 4 more, then I'll give you 4 more, because we know checkout was a 16 form field process, and 16 is a made-up number. But the thought process was, if we only ask for 4 things at once, it will be easier for our customer to take that next step. But what you did was you forced them to go through a 4-page process, which forced them to reload 4 different pages, which slowed them down. When in reality, the customer's smart enough to know you need all 16 of these fields, so why are you only asking me for 4? And it felt a little weird to them. That's kind of old school e-commerce conversion mentality. Unfortunately, a lot of people are still designing with that mentality, whereas new data, new studies prove that a one-page checkout process works best. And then as you're doing that, make sure that your web designer is leveraging great code to make it fast, smooth, and easy. And specifically what I'm referring to when I say use great code is looking for places that you can use different code, and I'm going to try to de-geek this as much as possible, which is a little bit hard for a geek at heart, but de-geek it as much as possible. Use great code so that you have to reload the page as little as possible. So for example, if you are putting a call out, or you're putting in dates, you're searching availability basically, you can do that in a couple ways. And you need to make sure that that process is done in a way that it doesn't force an entire page reload to happen, because that will slow things down and add steps to the process, ultimately making it harder for your customer. We've talked a lot about making a booking on your website with your mobile device, so I won't spend any time there, but have you done that? And then have you ever tested, or have you recently tested your checkout process? Anytime you're making a major change to your website, or probably I should remove the word major there, but anytime you're making a change that impacts your conversion path from start to finish, from home page to confirmed booking, anytime you're changing anything in that path, you need to go through that process yourself and study it. And I would also say you need to go through that process with your least educated customer and see the way they do that. Now, maybe that's your grandma, right? I mean, not that my grandma is least educated. She's actually an incredibly smart woman, but technologically, she's the least educated, probably. Hopefully she's not on this webinar today. If she is, her birthday was 2 days ago. I'm sorry, Grandma, but you're not that great with your mobile device. But you've got to think about those people. Those people are making bookings on your site, and you've got to think about that with them and study the way they do that and move through that checkout process. If they can move through that smoothly, it's easy for them. So you've got to test that on a regular basis to make sure your site's performing well. And then number 5 is that's to increase conversion and reconversion opportunities. We talked a little bit about this as we've gone throughout our time together today. I've kind of woven it into multiple parts of the conversation. But if your only call to action on your website is book now, you're missing 99% of your visitors. 99% of people will not respond to a book now call to action. And we know that because remember, 1% on average is the conversion rate. I showed you that a few minutes ago. That's where I'm getting the other 99%. Hundreds, if not thousands of people are coming to your website every day. Depending on how much traffic you have, this is your number, but what are you doing to convert them? And I talk about this. I just spoke at a conference in Phoenix a couple weeks ago. And one of the things I touched on was I said, you can invest all this money into marketing, and that's important, and you should. And our average customer sees a 25 to 40% increase in traffic their first year using our marketing platform. And that's awesome. That's really exciting. It's great results. It's industry-leading results as we study it. But some of our customers also invest in their conversion path. And if we do that, and they have a 0.5% conversion rate, and we double that to a 1% conversion rate, we have just doubled the number of people converting on their website, taking action on their website without touching traffic at all. Without increasing traffic at all, we've doubled the online conversion they're getting through this type of a strategy. So you've got to think about that. As you're making investments, as you're planning your marketing budget, you really need to be thinking about allocating money for what's called CRO, or conversion rate optimization. And if you have enough traffic, you can justify the ROI on that pretty quickly by understanding and studying what type of impact would a 0.5% increase in conversion make for you. What lead intelligence do you have? So maybe you're doing lead generation well. Maybe you have a lot of conversion. Maybe you have 4% conversion, which some of our highest performing customers are getting 4% conversions on their sites. Maybe that's you. And you need to be thinking a little bit deeper about how you convert a lead you already have. So you're getting 4% conversion on your site, but once you have that lead, what are you ultimately doing with it? What percentage of your leads are converting into a booking? And that's where lead intelligence can come in. What do you know about the people coming to your website? Do you know their name? Do you know their phone number? Do you know their email address? Do you know what pages they visited? Do you know what blogs they read? Do you know how many times they've come to your website? Do you know how many years they've been coming to your website consistently? All of this can be found and studied through lead intelligence and through having a great CRM or customer relationship management tool. So making sure that you're using that can really help you increase conversion as well. And then making sure that you're planning offers with intentionality and seasonality. If you have outdated content, be them offers, be them specials, be them whatever, on your website, you're missing people. If someone logs onto your website right now and the call to action relates to booking this great summer package and you have these beautiful images of summertime, chances are you're going to lose a lot of people because you're not speaking with intentionality and seasonality in mind. And in the same way, the calls to action need to speak to that too, and building around that, knowing that your strategy should be different now than it was in the spring. It should be different now than it was in the summer, and making sure you're working that into your website. And then what's your post-conversion strategy, aka your reconversion strategy? And there's a couple of things we look at reconversion. One is if someone converts in the dreaming and planning stage of their process, not ready to make a booking yet, but they convert up higher in the sales funnel, what is our reconversion strategy to get them to take the next step, get them to take the next step, and get them to move closer and closer and closer to booking until they're ready to make a booking so they book with you? And that's putting reconversion opportunities in front of them. And in the same way that we study that with reconversion, we're also thinking about those past guests who are in the remembering state of their vacation and reconverting them. And that's where I talk about guests who are coming back to your website year after year after year, tracking that and knowing that and speaking to those people and having a reconversion strategy to bring people back year after year after year. And what we have found, and this makes a lot of sense, but the more times a lead converts, the more likely they are to ultimately book with you. To kind of put this in perspective, the more times somebody comes to hear us speak at a conference, the higher the percentage chance that they will end up doing business with us. And in the same way, that's true for you and your business. The more opportunities your website has for someone to convert into a lead, The more they get to know your company, the more they like you, the more they trust you, the more likely they are to book with you when they're ready to make a purchasing decision. That's true across the board in marketing, but it's absolutely true for your customers. And you really need to be thinking about that and knowing that, driving reconversion in your strategy. And just for you guys, because we love you, we threw in bonus tip number 6, and that's this one I'm going to hit quickly, but optimize, track, test, repeat. The graphic there says plan it, do it, check it, adjust it, which is the old, or plan, do, check, act, but plan, do, check, adjust is another one of these. And we use this a lot as we talk about things at Q4 Launch as part of our commitment to get a little bit better every day. We plan it, do it, check it, adjust it. Throughout our processes consistently, everything we do moves through that process. And as we relate that to the web, we look at optimize, track, test, repeat. Optimize, track, test, repeat. So we go through a process of optimizing a part of the strategy. We track it, we test it, and we repeat it. And you have to do those things to get it closer and closer and closer to converting it the path you want it to. So whether plan it, do it, check it, adjust it needs to become a part of your everyday business practices as your commitment in your business to get a little bit better every day, or whether you need to use the optimize, track, test, repeat mentality, I really want you to take that away because that can transform your business in 2017. Whether you apply it to your website or you apply it to other parts of your business, it's transformed ours since I learned that in an MBA class I was taking, but an awesome opportunity to really impact your business in a big way. So we want to hit you guys with a couple polls real quick. If you'd help me with that, I definitely appreciate it. And this just helps us get an idea of who's attending things. The first question we have for you is, are you considering a website redesign in the next 12 months? So in the rest of 2016 or 2017. You could let us know that. That would be awesome. Just gives us an idea of who's coming, why you came, and if this information was valuable for you. So we've got about 25% of those responses in. If you're on and you haven't engaged in that, please do that quickly so we can keep moving our time along here together today. Awesome. Thank you for those of you voting. Give you about 3 more seconds on that, and then we will move along here. Thank you. See a couple more coming in. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for those. Thank you. All right. I'm going to close that poll. 3, 2, 1, close. And then the next thing we wanted to make an opportunity for you, that kind of wraps up our content, but a couple other questions we have. I know a lot of people look for opportunities to take some next steps. And we want to make our marketing grader available to you today. The marketing grader is a great opportunity for you to figure out how your marketing is performing. As a part of that, we also want to make our 21-point website inspection available. So if you're wondering how your website performs on some of these things, we want to offer our 21-point website inspection for you, totally free of charge. It is part of our shared knowledge, core value, and giving back to the industry. We want to offer our 21-point website inspection. So you can do that. You can request that now on the poll. Launch another poll for you quickly there, so you can answer that. And then we have one more question for you. So if you could hang with us for just a minute, I'd appreciate your answer to this last question, and then we're going to do Q&A. So hang on for that as well. I know we've had lots of questions coming in, or a couple questions coming in. If you have questions for us, please go ahead and put those in the chat panel. But would you like the 21-point website inspection so we can help you figure some of these things out and give you some quick tips, just about some quick tips on how your website could perform in these areas? All right, we're going to go ahead and close that poll as well. Last chance to vote on that there. Awesome. And then the last one, and this is part of what we're looking at, is we're planning our strategy for content next year. So we teach these webinars. We taught, I think, about 15,000 people this year through our webinar strategy, which is a lot of people. But we want to know how we can help you. So this question is, would you consider attending a regional seminar on marketing hosted by us? If we took the free content we give away via digital seminars, would you be interested in doing that in person in 2017? Can really help us figure some of those things out and know how we can best help you. So that would be helpful for us if you just let us know that. Quick answer to that question, and then we can move on. Just whether it be worth traveling to a regional seminar to learn this type of information, or we do multiple webinar style content in person in one day, and you get to meet our teachers face-to-face, which many of you have met me face-to-face, and you know that's not really something to be excited about. But but thank you for those. Thank you for answering those questions. Go ahead and close that poll here, and I appreciate that. So last, we want to answer your questions. So we're going to take this opportunity to do questions and answers. So if you have questions, go ahead and use that chat panel there, and we will go ahead and get those questions answered for you. All right, so our first question here is from Susan. What do you use to test conversion? And there's a couple ways. That's kind of an open-ended question, Susan. We want to answer that for you as best we can. There's a couple things we're looking at. One is we're studying user flow as they move through Google Analytics. So that's one of the things we're using to study that. And you can actually go into the behavior part of Google Analytics. You can see landing pages. You can see the way people are flowing through your website. All that can be very, very beneficial as you're studying those things. And that's where we recommend you start if you're redesigning your site or you're considering that in 2017, because that's an important thing that will give you lots of insights that you need as you're going into the process of redesigning it. For example, the fact that 70% of our, the fact that 30% of our traffic, our customers' traffic, enters our websites via the blog, we know that because we study that in the behavior part of Google Analytics. The second component to answering your question could be A/B testing. And there's great tools to do that. Google has some free tools available to do that. If you have a WordPress website, there's some WordPress plugins available to do that. It can get very time-consuming and laborious and expensive to do A/B testing. So you really need to have a certain level of traffic before you justify the cost of doing some of those things. But not knowing your traffic level, that's some quick tools you can use to be able to do that. Hopefully that answers your question for you. I know that might have been on some of our other minds as well. And then we had a question, what are the 21 points in the website inspection that you inspect? Christy, it's a kind of a tough question to answer here just because there's a lot of information in that. But if you're curious, I would just encourage you to request the 21-point inspection, whether you did that through the poll or you didn't, but now you're curious, you can always email me. My email address is there on the screen, and we'll be happy to connect with you on that. But thanks for asking the question. So it looks like that's it. The other questions that popped in there were actually more housekeeping questions that we've answered kind of throughout our time together today. So if there's any other questions, please pop those in the chat panel. Be happy to answer them. We have about 7 minutes left here in our block of time, 2:53 Eastern time. But happy to answer any other questions that people might have. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. I am almost back. I've got one more conference, so we're going to be committed to doing more webinars through the end of the year. So look for a lot of information from us coming out on more free webinars the rest of November and then to December. We have some great content planned to give away to you guys for the rest of this year and into 2017. So thank you for that. If there's any questions, feel free to email me or call me. We'd be happy to help any way we can. And thank you all for your participation in the webinar today. Thank you as well for participating in the polls and helping us plan our content as we're looking ahead at 2017. Thanks, everybody. We look forward to talking to you again soon.